and welcome. So today what we're going to look at is a app that connects to an online database and downloads and uploads data. So for the context of IA3 for digital solutions, we're doing a Tuckshop or a Canteen app. So let's get started. So we use Firebase Online here. It's a free web storage system. It's one of the most popular ones too. Now I've already set up a project. I'm more than happy to show you how to set one up. It is pretty straightforward. And we use our Firestore database. This is all set up in a free account as well, which has a read and write limit, but it's quite high, so we don't actually have a problem with using it for this scale. So now in here, I've already started a collection with items of food for sale in the Tuckshop. So we've got things like category, in-stock name, and price for each of our different items. And they all have different categories, different prices, different names. So that's basically all set up in the back end, and students are going to download this list and display it, and then they're going to create a separate list of orders, which they're then going to upload here as well. So let's get started with Xcode. So we're going to create a new Xcode project, and it's going to be an iOS app. I'm just going to move this a little bit to go next. And it's very important that the bundle ID down here matches the name on Firestore. So at the moment, if I have a look at my project, and I've already linked it to my Stack app, or rather I've set it up. So you can see down here, the Apple ID, the bundle ID has to be Stack IA3 2022. So I'm going to copy that and paste that in here and Stack so that the bundle identifier matches. So that's the first thing that needs to happen to connect to Firebase. I'm just going to create this in my downloads folder. And then once it's created, the next thing I need is the Google Info plist file. Now this Google Service Info plist file, that's very valuable because what it does, it actually has things like for an API, it has the API key and bits and pieces of data. So I'm going to download that and drop it into my project file, and I'm going to add it to my target. So that way it compiles. That can go up here. It doesn't really matter where it goes as long as it's in this folder. Now you can see interesting things. So here's the API key. So that's kind of should be very familiar for students who might have used an API before. So the next thing I'm going to do is set up my folders. So I'm going to create a new group. This one's going to be views. And then I'm going to create another folder. New group. This one's going to be called models. Technically speaking, you can create a view model folder as well. I think that 2 groups is enough for me. Now I've got my Google Service plist file, and at the moment this should be fine. I don't really use that simulator when we're using online data because I find it connects to the database a lot, so it's kind of too many times. It might not necessarily work the way we want it to. We've got to go to add package, and you can use that same Firebase link here. That goes up there like that. And then you can see it here, and I always go up to the next major version, and I add it to the project. So then, there's my simulator. So then when I'm happy, I hit add to project. It'll take a while to actually connect and start downloading it. Okay, so that took a little while to load. So what we're looking at is the Firebase AUTH for authentication, the Firebase Firestore, and the Firebase Firestore Swift files. So we hit add package, and then this window disappears and it sits here and downloads. And again, this might take a little while to download. Okay, so now that's taken a little while, but it's downloaded the packages and it's indexed them and everything else. And you'll notice there's quite a lot of warnings. They're actually just an orange warning, so they're not a problem for us. So again, you'll notice also it's automatically added the package dependency. Pretty cool. So if we build and run, what it will do, it'll launch up on the simulator again, and it should say hello world. Fantastic. So now we've got our content view, and we've got basically all of our projects ready to go. Now, before I go too far, I am going to connect to the Firestore, but before I do, I need to create some models that match what I'm expecting from the Firestore. So in my models folder, I'm going to create a new file. All up, we're going to have 3 new files. We're going to have, the first one is going to be for the actual items of food. So I'm going to call this food item. There it is. Okay, so we're going to have a structure. And it's going to be identifiable, which means I can then list it. And it's going to be codable. That means we can encode and decode it into our, well, effectively we're jumping through JavaScript object notation onto Firebase, but we don't have to handle any of that, which is fantastic. Our first error is that our food item is not identifiable, so let's give it an ID, and we're going to just assign a UUID for this one. The next one, we're going to have a category, and it's going to be a string, and we're going to have a name of the food item. So the category might be like drinks or hot food or cold snacks or anything like that, and then the name might actually be like icy pole or pie or something. We have our price. Now the price, I want to be in a double, so that way I can have dollars and cents, and an in stock as a Boolean. Now in this project, I don't use in stock, but I've just kind of left it there as a bit of a hint on how you might personalize this app a little bit later. Now that doesn't have any errors, but just to be 100% sure that we are conforming to this codable, I'm going to create my enum or enumeration for coding keys. And we're looking for a string value and then the coding key. Coding key. And we're going to have a case for each of category, name, price, and in stock. We don't have to encode ID because we're not passing that along to Firebase. Firebase will create its own document ID, so that's not something we have to worry about. The other thing that I want to do later on, I've got a list of food items, and there's quite a lot of them. I think there's about 130 items, just at a glance. So instead of just having a list of 130 food items, that's a lot, I'm going to categorize them based on this category that we download from the data set. So we can have a food categories, and that's going to be a list, and I'm going to create it as a list of strings. So my categories of my food are warm food, sandwiches, toasted sandwiches. Spelling and case are very, very important because as we categorize, I'm going to match this basically to my data store. If I go back to my database, I'm going to match this to capital S snacks category. So we can lowercase them and stuff like that and handle all these kind of errors, but that's something that you might do on your own app. I'm just kind of referring to the list of food categories that we've got here: salads, snacks, frozen snacks, fruit, drinks, extras, and then we have specials. So we have Tuesday specials, copy, Wednesday specials, Thursday specials, and Friday specials. We don't have Monday specials. No one likes Mondays. So that's basically our list of food items, basically sorted. So our next model that we're going to have, again, we're going to create a new file for this, is going to be our orders. And this is where we're going to put it. So it's going to be quite similar. It's actually going to be even more straightforward. So let's create a struct order. And again, it's going to be identifiable. Helps if I spell struct correctly. Identifiable and codable, because again, we're going to encode and decode it from the Firestore. Now, this ID is going to be a string format. And the reason why is because I need to know what order I'm dealing with. We're only downloading food items, but students can create orders and upload them and delete other people's orders and all this kind of stuff. And so we need to know which order particularly we're using. And so that's going to be using the document ID from Firestore. So you'll notice it here, automatically generated, but it's not in the case of like a UUID like for Swift. So it's easier just to hold it in a string for now. And we have our student name, and we have our items. Now, the list of items, again, I'm going to make quite a big leap here and assume that our list of items, these items here, have a unique name for each item. So every item is going to have a different name. That's a big jump to make, I am aware, but it's going to be a lot easier to upload a list of string to our Firebase than it is to upload a list of actual items with structures engraved as well. So you could even use the item ID as your string. That might be very useful. The only difference is that you wouldn't be able to create the ID each time. You would have to then have an UUID that we're passing up to Firebase, so you'd have to add a coding key to that. Again, that's not a big drama. We can do that at a future date. The last thing is total price for the order. And the price we might save as a double, just so it kind of matches our price of our item. And again, just to make sure that we're conforming to this codable, we're going to create an enum called coding keys. And it's going to be of type string coding key. And again, this time we're going to pass the ID in as well. Items and total price. And the reason why is because, like I said, we're passing this up to the Firebase. So that's pretty much that done. So the last step we're going to do is we're going to create our, well, let's connect to the Firebase first, and then we can create our model. So before we do, whoops, I did not want to do that. Get rid of that. We're going to create another file. This is going to be our view model. And this is going to hold a list of each of the food items and orders. So let's call it item view model, just something generic. And I'll show you what this one does. So for this one, we're going to import combine so that we can do things asynchronously or at the same time. And then we're also going to need Firebase, Firestore to connect to the database, and Firebase, and that's just to initialize to then connect to the Firebase. We're going to have a class. Now, the difference is we're going to create instances of structures and put them into our class. So the class is really important because it triggers a view update. Item view model, and this one is going to be an observable object, which you can't do with a structure. And what we're going to have two things. We're going to have food and we're going to have orders. I wonder why this first mark didn't update. Let's see if I can build and get rid of that error. So far, we shouldn't have any errors. Takes a little while. It's a good sign so far that it is building this far. We haven't done anything crazy unique. We're still at the same view. We've just created our two data structures, and we've got our Firebase installed, ready to run. Now, while that's going, let's create a published variable called food items. This is a plural, and it's going to be a list of food that's going to start empty. Woohoo, build succeeded. Now, the next thing we're going to do is also have a published var orders, and that's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a list of order, and it's going to start blank as well. And when we start running this stuff, we'll get food and everything like that. Food item. That kind of helps because that's what we've called it up here. So we've got our class item view model, which is observable and has these food items and orders. And as we update them, they're published. That means they update the SwiftUI views as well, which is fantastic. Now, before we go too far, let's go back into our app and connect to Firestore, download all the items, all that kind of thing. So let's jump up to our IA3 2022 app, this one here with the window group. And what we're going to do, again, we're going to import two libraries, import Firebase and import Firebase Firestore. Now, we're going to create an app delegate that, so if you're using Swift storyboards, you might remember there was like a did finish launching with options. We got to trigger please connect to the Firestore and download the data, but we're going to trigger that when the app finished launching. Now, with SwiftUI, it's a little bit harder. Not by a lot though. So I'm going to create a class app delegate, and I'm going to need the NS object, UI application delegate, that one. And then in this app delegate, I'm going to have a function called application. Now we need the did finish launching. No, not that one. Let's keep typing. Application application, UI application, did finish launching with options, launch options, and they're going to be a list of UI application dot launch options key with a type of any, and it's optional, so we might not have any launch options. And we're going to assign them to nil as well, so that if we don't specify any launch options, then it's still going to launch, and it's going to output a Boolean. Now that is actually like an override statement as well. So at the end, we've got to return true at some stage to say, yes, we've finished launching, we're happy to then boot back into the app. So there's no dramas here other than that we're not actually doing anything. So what we might do to prove that this works, we might print IA3 app is starting up. Application delegate did finish launching with options. Something like that, just so that we can double check or we know that this is actually working. So after that, then we're going to go Firebase app.configure, and that basically goes, yep, no worries, have a look for this Google Service playlist file, create all the web links and connect to that Firebase Firestore, which is this one here. Now, we need to then look for the food items array and download the data. So that's actually all pretty much ready to go from here. The only thing we've got to do is add this app delegate to our app now. So to do that, we just create a UI application delegate adapter. And the app delegate itself, app delegate.self, delegate, like that. So that, if I now build and run, should actually configure the Firebase. Should basically build, set up, connect to the data store. It's not downloading any data. We haven't told it to do so yet, but it should find everything. And we just have to wait. It's a bit slow again. Fantastic. So all of this stuff happens in the blink of an eye. It's absolutely amazing how fast these devices, even in a test bed like this, as in a simulator, how fast they actually really are. So here's my little hello world. So that's fantastic. That's all working. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my object item view model here. So this is going to be a state object, and the reason I use the state object is because if the value of anything inside of this that's published in our item view model, so that's our published food items and our published orders, if any of that changes, it updates pretty much from here forward, all of the views. So we've got our state object. This is going to be called item view model, and I'm going to keep this lowercase. And it's important because this actually holds the data, but it's going to be of type item view model, and I'm going to initialize. That's going to like launch item view model, which again is not going to do anything yet. It's just going to have a blank list of food items and orders in it. And again, no dramas with this. Now, the last thing I'm going to do in my content view here, I'm going to pass it into the environment, this item that we've created. Now, what that means is I don't have to pass it as a binding to the content view and then as a binding to the next view and the next view and the next view. I can just use the one object in the environment. So it's just kind of like held in the middle of the app, which is fantastic. So I'm going to build and run again, and it should still work the same, but now we have our item view model and we're ready to go. Now, while it's loading, let's jump into our item view model. We haven't really done anything, but we have connected to the Firestore. So let's go ahead and let's actually create our code to get at everything. So we're going to have a get food function. And in here in our orders, we're going to have a get orders function. Whoops, needs a func keyword in front of it. Build succeeded, that's fantastic. So that's all ready to go. Get orders. And if I go back to my simulator, you'll still see hello world. Fantastic. So when we're getting our food and when we get our orders, so when do we actually do that? Well, we want to do that up here in our app when we initialize here. So to actually access when we're initializing this item view model, we can just create a, you know what, I'm going to put this up even higher and in it. And we're going to override the initializer. And when we do that, we're going to get food and we're going to get orders. So that basically connects to the data store and downloads both. Well, not yet, but it will. Now for the get food, I'm going to put some comments in here to tell you how we're going to do this. So we're going to get a reference to the database. That's going to be DB. Firestore, like that. So now we've got our reference to, if I jump back in over here to this data store here, but before we get to food items. So let's keep going. The next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to read documents at a specific path. db.collection food items. Now that is going to then point us to our food items. Now we're going to replace that later when we copy and paste it into orders. So pretty cool. So that's all of our items, our array. I'm going to get documents. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to call the document a snapshot. And we'll handle an error as well in case we have any issues. So first thing we're going to do then is check for errors. If there is no error, whoops, then what we're going to do, oops, no errors. Then we're going to update the list property in the main thread. So this food items list. So we're going to use the dispatch queue for that. So we're going to use dispatch queue main, whoops, async. That's not async. That's async. Okay. And we're going to go self.foodItems is equal to the snapshot that we got dot documents. So all of those documents. And I'm actually going to say, yes, we actually did get a snapshot of data here. Dot documents dot map, and we're going to map using our coding keys that we had before. And I'm going to create, so each document is going to be like D, because otherwise I'm going to type document a million times. Snapshot. Snapshot, this one here needs to be that one there. Just going to build it to kind of try and get rid of that error. Fantastic. Yes, excellent, because we can't actually convert anything to food item yet because we haven't done that file. So then we're going to create a food item for every document. Food item for every document returned. So to do that, it's actually really cool. We're going to return food item dot, oops, and we're going to use the default here without the ID because remember our food item generates an ID for us. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to put each of these on a new line. So for our category, what we're going to look for is in our document, and we're going to look for the word category. And this is really important now that our category is uppercase C, lowercase the rest, and is spelled the same. So we've got to be really careful here. Now that's going to be a value of any. So I'm going to try unwrapping it as a, and then if that doesn't work, then I'm just going to give it a blank category or like other. So it's just going to go to like some other category there. Cool. And we're going to do the same with name and price and in stock, but price is a double. So we're going to, and in stock is a Boolean. So we're going to do that a little bit differently. So to do name, I'm going to copy that, paste that in here. This time I'm looking for name. And if I don't get a name, I'm just going to leave it blank. Or item fails to load or something like that. Something that tells the user like, we've got a problem with this item. Now the price, we're expecting a double. So it's going to be I don't know, fairly similar, I guess. So we're going to have a double, but this time we're looking for price, which is going to be here. Now you'll notice price is actually in string format. Everything in our data store, our cloud Firestore, is in string format just because it's easier to handle. So we're going to look for a price as a string. And if we don't find it, we're going to give it a price of 0. And because we're forcing it into a double, we're going to force unwrap it as well. Now I can only do that because I know that all of my data is in fact a double. And then our in stock is going to be pretty much the same as the double. This is going to be a Boolean, and then we're going to pass the data store object in. So I'm just going to paste this in stock. So you'll notice this in stock is lowercase because it matches our food item in stock here, right? And then this in stock is uppercase because it matches our in stock here on our Firestore. So that's kind of where we cause the relationship here. So we're going to do a Boolean as in stock as a string, and then we're going to pass it into Boolean is true or false. And if we don't find a value, I'm going to assume false. It's going to be out of stock. Now that second bracket here, that's actually not to do with our in stock. That's actually to do with our food items. So we're returning them all. So that's how we're mapping them across. Now that's pretty cool. Now, otherwise, if we do have an error, there is an error, so then we handle the error. And you can like do a print statement or anything you'd like there. So I'm not going to bother with that. So that's it. So that's basically how you get food. So if you build and run now, what we should see, well, it's still just our hello world, but in the back end, we've created our app, we've connected to Firestore, we've initialized this function, which gets food, which then creates this reference to the Firestore, looks in the food items category, maps them all in the main asynchronously. So basically the view will load for us. So that basically does everything we need it to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy from here all the way up to here, copy, and get food. And I'm going to do the same thing for get orders. So I'm going to paste that in. The only difference is instead of food items, we're going to go for orders, which don't exist yet, which is fine. Yep, fantastic. And you can see some code loading in here as well. You'll see like a whole lot of things. Very interesting. Doesn't really mean much to me. Okay, so we've got our get orders. So again, same thing, get a reference to the database. Yeah, because we need to Firebase app configure before using Firestore. Well, we have done that. If I hit stop, in here, Firebase app.configure. So we've got to do that basically when we did finish launching, but before we initialize our item view model and put it into the object. So that's fantastic. Anyway, moving on. So we had our food items all done. So let's have a look at our get orders. So we've got our collection orders. And we're going to get the same document, and it's going to be called a snapshot as well. But this time, instead of returning a food item, we're going to return an order. So I'm going to delete this whole lot and return order. And again, I'm just going to use the initializer. I'm going to move these to next line just so that it makes it easier to see what we're doing. Now, the ID is going to be the d.document ID. That's actually, if I go back to Firebase, that's this document ID here. It's not actually part of our field. So it's a little bit different how we locate it in our field. So the next thing is the student name. And we're going to look for a string. So we're going to use d student name as a string. And if we don't find it, it's just going to be blank. Or let's say no name on the order. For our items, we're going to go for our D items. Now, the items is interesting. Now, we can actually unwrap it as a list of string, which is pretty cool. And then if it doesn't work, then we're still going to have a list of strings, but this one is going to just be initialized blank. And the total price, similar to before, we're going to go for a double for the D total price. Whoops. In my data store, I noticed this is a lowercase in, anyway, it doesn't matter, in here. And this is going to be as a string. And then if we can't get it, we're going to go 0, and we can force unwrap that because, again, we know that should work. And let's build that. So now we're almost downloading our items. Let's have a look. What did we do wrong here? Total price as string, and if it doesn't work, put it in there as a double. I don't see a problem with that. Oh, because a double is a, okay. So the double must default to 0, 0. Oh, no, that's what it is. It's because I had a space there. I'll convert type. Ah, I see, because we're trying to map our orders to our food items. So we've got to put this not in our food items, but into our orders array. That would make sense. And again, that'll take a little while. Now, that's basically downloading data. It's as simple as that. And we're actually downloading two data sets, one that exists and one that doesn't. So the next thing that we're going to do with our orders, we've got our get order. I'm going to double click here. And then we're going to have like, well, let's try and add an order. And we're going to use this later on. Add order. And we're going to need all of the details about the order, right? So we don't need a document ID because Firestore creates it for us, but we're going to need our student name as a string. We're going to have the items as a list of string, and we're going to need the total price, and that's as a double. Actually, you know what? Just to make it easy, let's name it a string here, and then when we pass it in later on in our views, then we can convert it to a string in our view before we actually use it here. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so kind of very similar. So we're going to still get a document reference, or rather a reference to the database. So I'm going to copy that and paste that here. So we're using the same Firestore, and then we're going to add a document to the collection. And to do that, we're going to go db.collection. So very similar. If you have a look up here, orders get documents, but this time it's going to be orders.add document. And our data is going to be our, so we're going to look at the student's name. So this looks like coding keys almost, and we're going to use the student name that we've passed in here. And our items are going to be the list of items as a string. And the total price is going to be the total price that was passed in here. So this kind of maps to here now. So it's kind of passing in these lists for us, which is kind of cool. Now, if we can add that, that's excellent. But if we can't, we should handle an error. So we'll go if error is equal to nil, then there's no errors. And then else there was an error, and we have to handle the error. Now, if there are no errors, what I want to do is I've uploaded this new item. So why don't we then go and get the orders, re-download them, and re-update this published list of orders. So to do that, I'm just going to go self.getOrders. So if there is no error and we've been able to add that item. That's as simple as it is, just using this add document. Crazy cool. The last thing I want to do, so we've got downloading the data, we've got adding or uploading the data. The last thing, let's do some deleting of data. Delete order, because I'm thinking I might have a button that will do that for me. Order to delete. It's going to be of type order. And I'm just going to pass it in here because I'm going to use my for each list later on. So again, same thing as before, we're going to get a reference to the Firestore. And then we're basically just going to specify the document to delete using the ID. Specify the document to delete. So we're going to do db.collection, and we're looking in the orders, which again doesn't exist yet, but will, dot document, and we're going to say the order to this order dot ID, because remember that's the document ID that we're using. So then we delete the correct one, dot delete, and I'm going to open my squiggly brackets or my parentheses because I want to check for errors. I can do this all on the same line. Error in, check for error, no error. Then I want to, so once I've deleted that, I actually want to update my order list as well. So kind of similar, but this time with the dispatch queue, main async. We're going to go self.orders.remove all, and we don't want to remove all of them. We only want to remove the specific order, order in, check for the order to delete, and then we're going to return order.id is equal to order to delete.id. So if the orders IDs match, then we're going to delete them from our orders list. So that's two different ways. One way, we get our orders, we download them. When we add an order, we go back and we re-download. But if we delete an order, this is a different way of doing it. We just remove the one from the local list and we delete it from the collection anyway. We just got to be careful that our local list here, which is this one here, I suppose you could call it a snapshot, as I have. It's only a snapshot. It might not be the actual reflection of the order list directly. Okay, so if I build this, then technically speaking, it should build no worries. So we have got all of our functions, all of our basically hard work done. So the last thing we need to do is create our views. And that's the simple part. I'll just make sure it does build before we move on. A little bit slow. Fantastic. So let's move to our content view. Now, for me, I'm thinking I might have a tab view. I might have a list of food items, and then on the other view, I might have a list of orders. So the first thing I'm going to do is create two new views. New file, SwiftUI view. One of them, let's create as our food list view, something that makes sense. And here it is. And I'm going to create another Swift view, and this one can be orders list view. Like that. So now we have food and orders. Now in my content view, I'm going to then create my tab view. Tab view. And we're going to have our food list view. And it's going to have the tab item attached to it with a label. And we're going to call this menu, because it's like a menu of food. And we're going to add a system image, and I'm going to use list dash. So it's like a dash list of this food list view. The next thing I'm going to do is add the orders list view. And same thing, dot tab item with a label. This one is going to be called orders, and it's going to have a system image of a bag. Okay, so we've got our body, our tab view with our food list view and our orders list view. So let's build and run that. So we should be connecting to the Firestore, downloading all the items into our item view model, and then actually not using them. But we have our menu and our orders. So next is actually creating our food list view. So on our food list view, if we have a look, it's a little bit different. So we're going to create our reference to our, what do we call it, environment object outside of our body. Environment object, item view model, just for consistency, and we're looking for the item view model that we loaded in. Now again, you can build and run, and we have our item view model with all of our variables there, but we're not actually using it at all. So in our body, rather than our text, hello world, let's get rid of that. that might cause an error depending on if it's built with that view or not, because now our view is empty. And we're going to have a navigation view with a list side. And then I'm going to use the for each, and I'm looking for the food categories. So remember those categories that we created in our food item, so warm food, sandwiches, etc. We're going to create sections for each of our categories. And we're just going to say the ID or each item is going to be unique. And we need to give it a name, so let's call it category name in, and we can create a section called category name. And that section, let's leave it blank for now, let's run it and see what happens. So last time we hit run, we just ran it with the blank view, with the 2 tab views down the bottom. So this time round, we should see a section for each of our categories. Later, here we go. And there's all our categories all ready to go, and they're in a list in a navigation view, which doesn't have a title at the moment. So let's add a title to our navigation view. Navigation title. Let's call it menu, because then it matches the tab view at the bottom. Yeah. Now for our food, we got to think about how can we categorize them. So luckily, we've actually got a category for each food item. Again, while that runs, let's keep going. So for each, and now we're going to go for our item view model dot food item. So that's that list of food items, and we're going to call each one is going to be item. So again, here's our categories, but now we should have our menu at the top. So for each item, we're going to call this a food item. Notice the lowercase f, or maybe this food item or whatever. The food item dot category, category is equal to our category name. Now that's why it's so important in our food item category list that these are spelled correctly, because they must match. These snacks, for example, must be the same as snacks in this list, because if they don't, then when we create our food list view, they won't match. So we've got a problem then. So we're going to do H stack. Let's put the text food item name. Let's put a spacer in the middle, and then we can have the food item price. Now the price isn't a double, right? So I've got to convert it to a string format before I can pass it into my text. And the format that I want is going to be, remember it's a double, so I'm going to use the $sign before my value. I'm going to then put my value in. I then want 2 decimal points. So that's like a regular price then, I guess. And then I'm using food item block. And this category name should be capitalized like that, because this is this category name here, goes here. Okay, let's build and make sure we've got no errors. Then we should actually have our simulator for the very first time connecting to the data store and actually showing what we've seen. So we've got our list, and it took a second, but bang, we've got all of our items. So we have downloaded all of our menu items. So that's pretty much it for the menu. Now let's work on the orders. So for the orders, let's click on the orders view, and we're going to do something very similar. So we've already got our environment view object view model, which is fantastic. So from here, this is our orders list view, right? So we're going to create a list of orders, and we have our state show create order view as well. Now, both of them are very valuable. So the first one links to that view model where we have our list of orders and food items, and we can use that same view model to upload or delete data from the Firebase database. The next one, we're going to create an order view a bit later on as well. So I thought I might put that in early. So it's going to be very similar to our food list view, but we're going to create different sections. So the first thing we're going to do is a navigation view. going to let me do it, navigation view with a list inside of it. And this list will, and this navigation view actually can have a navigation title as well. And we can call this orders. And then in our list, we're going to say only if the item view model orders, item view model.orders.count is greater than 0, then do this, else no orders. We're going to put some text that says no orders, no existing orders or something like that. Okay, so let's have a look. Now, if we do have orders, then for each of our orders, item view model.orders, and we can say, like, let's call it this order for each of our orders. And we're going to create a section for this order. And the reason why is because if you have a look at this view here, our menu view, we're going to have a section for frozen snacks, etc. So we're going to have a section with the order and then the order items, I suppose, and then a title at the bottom. So this section is going to use this order.studentName for the title, and then let's put this in a vertical stack. And the reason why is because I don't want the items to be separated with this little, it's hard to see on the recording, but there's like a divider between each of our items, and I don't want that there. So I'm going to put them in a vertical stack. And then for each, this order.items, and these items are a string, so we're going to have to say ID self, and let's call this food item in, just so we know what it is. Now, this is only a food item name. This is not actually the food item itself. Remember, this is only a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to find that item in the actual food list. So this is going to say if let this item equal, let's say item view model dot food items dot first where. So we're going to search for the first item where the dot name is equal to food item name. So where the strings match. So if we can do that, then we're going to do something. And if we can't, we're going to put some text that says item not found. So that'll kind of take care of if we can't find that item. If we've deleted an item and it's still in the order, or an order exists with an item that we've deleted, if that makes sense. So we want this item dot name, we want a spacer, and we want this item price. Now, the price again is in a double, so we're going to have to put it into a string first and force unwrap it. And we want the format to be the same as before, where we have the $sign, the value, and we're rounding to 2 decimal places. And this is going to be this item dot price. Okay. Then what we're going to do is outside of this vertical stack, but still in the same section. So we're still inside of this section, very important. Then I want to have our total. So I'm going to create a H stack. It looks like I am missing a bracket. Okay, we'll deal with that in a minute. And we've got our text, total, spacer, and then the text. And I'm going to copy this string format, but this time I'm going to go this order dot total price. That looks pretty good. The last thing I want to add, so I can see there is an error somewhere. Food item. I would say we have an extra bracket somewhere. Here we are missing a bracket. Let's see if that fixes our error. I'm just going to hit build. Okay, that looks better. We can't force unwrap a string. Okay. Well then, if that's okay, let's try that. Now, while that's working, it looks like it's going to work for me. I hope, fingers crossed. So we have our total price. So the next thing I want to do is in another H stack. So this is still in this section. We're going to create another horizontal stack. This one's going just to have 2 spaces and a button in the middle. So I'm using the spaces to make it center aligned. I could probably do that in the H stack alignment. Button, action, blank for now, and a label that says text. That's very good. Delete order. So this is going to delete the order for me. And to delete the order, remember, it was really easy because we have already set this up. So we go item view model dot delete order, and we need this order to go in, which this order is the same order in this section in this for each. So we've kind of created it uniquely. This is very cool. So we got no orders or no order data. We've got this is in our else statement, so I'm just going to collapse this. We've got our for each section here, so I'm just going to collapse that. So what I actually really want to do is where our navigation bar title orders is, I actually want to add a little bit more formatting. I want to add an item to create an order. So we're going to go navigation bar items, and we get leading and trailing. I just want the trailing, which is on the right-hand side. And I want a button. Action is going to be show. Remember, we created this show create order view. That's going to go in here. Oops, just like that. That's going to go true. And our button needs some text. That's going to say create order. And then the last thing that we need to do is inside our body, we're going to add a sheet that's going to bind itself to this show create order. So if show create order is true, then we're going to create our create order view, which doesn't exist at the moment. Create order view. And at the moment, like I said, this doesn't exist. So I'm going to create it then. So to create it, I'm just going to go for a new file, add the Swift view, and paste that in, create order view. There we go. So now we have a create order view that we can then use to build and run. So let's hit build and run. So it succeeds, and in our simulator, it launches. And we haven't changed our food list view, which is where we start off with. And there it goes, downloaded. And then we go to orders, and we don't have any orders, but we have our create order button. That, when we tap on, shows a sheet for our Hello World create order view. So we're pretty much ready to go. And this is going to populate a list as we go. So the last thing is our create order view. Now this view is a little bit bigger, just because it has, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 views inside of it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I don't really like the preview provider, so I'll delete that. And we need to kind of have a variable for everything that we need to create an order. Now I'm going to create these as state variables. And the reason why is because I'm going to create a form that's going to take all that data as we go, and it's going to update the form or the view as it stores the data. So we need the student name, we need the total price as a decimal, we need the items as a list of strings, and to start off with, the items are blank, and the state variable. Now, when we make an order, we've got our items, so we're going to have to create like a list of, we're going to have like the food list view, the menu, so that's going to have to pop up. So we're going to create like a pop over as well with using the show food list. It's going to start with false. And we're going to access our environment object, item view model. that. So we have our list of items. That way we can actually use the item view model to add the order when we're happy. The last thing I want to do is once I actually hit save order or whatever, I'm going to then unwind from this. So I'm going to dismiss this pop-up view. So if I go back in my simulator and I create my order, when I hit save, I'm going to dismiss this view back to my order. So I'm going to need to do that with an environment variable. Actually, let's use presentation mode. Like that. So far, so good. So our next step, what we're going to do in our body, we're going to create a vertical stack that's going to hold everything. And then we're going to use a horizontal stack to hold the text that says new order. And this is going to be a large title. And then we're going to put a spacer in. So it's going to push the new order to one side. So it's going to look very similar to this order. It's going to be large title and push this way. So the font is actually slightly different, but it doesn't really bother me too much. The next thing I'm going to put in is my form. And the first section of my form is going to be the person who's placing the order, right? So I'm just going to put that as student. And I want the student's name. And I'm going to put a spacer that does nothing because our text field will do the rest for us. And I'm going to use the title key, or the placeholder is going to be first name, surname, just as a suggestion what the student should be putting into there. And we're going to use this student name as a binding. Notice the dollar sign. So that's our section student. So our next section of our form is going to be for the items that we are going to purchase. And we're going to create a vertical stack with a list of all of our items. So I'm going to go vertical stack. Now, before we go and add our list of items, I'm going to put a button at the top of the list, which is going to then have like a add item to order. And just so that you can see how it works, I'm just going to put this all together like that on the same line. Now the action is show food list. I'm going to set that to true. So basically I'm going to toggle this show food list to true with this button, and that's going to trigger a new view. And then we're going to list all of our items. ID is self, food item in. Now, again, this is the food item name in the order because we're looking at a list of strings, right? We need a dot, ID dot self. Okay, so then what we're going to do, that's better, is we're going to see if we can find that item. Again, we might have added an item to the order and then deleted the food item directly off Firebase, or someone else might have done it by accident. So we want to do all of that, get rid of all that. So if let this item equals item view model dot food items dot first, where the item dot name is equal to the food item name that we've got here. Now, if we can't, then we're going to use item not found. And if we can find it, then we're going to put in a horizontal stack text this item dot name, a spacer, and then oops, and then this item dot price. Now price is the same as before, where we're going to need to have format it. And we're going to format it with a dollar sign, and then we're going to round to 2 decimal places. So hopefully this makes sense so far. And of course, this has to be in the string like this, because we're going to format it as a string. Okay, so the next thing, after our items, we're going to have a list of all of our items, and then we're going to have all of that. So inside this vertical stack still, inside our items, that section that is, we're then going to have a divider, which divider like that. And so that divider, if you have a look in your simulator and your menu list, so all of our items are going to be placed here with their prices here, and there's not going to be a line between each item. So they're going to be stacked pretty close, pretty tight. Then I want a divider, which is then going to put that line between our list of items and our total price. And to do the total price, we're going to do a horizontal stack with the text total, a spacer in the middle, and then the total price. Now I'm going to use the same string formatter as before. This time, I'm not looking for this item.price. I'm looking for the total price here. Like that. Now, all of that total, normally you would bold that or make that somehow look different to all of the list of items. I'm actually going to go font, headline for this one. So it's going to be a bit bolder than normal. Okay. So now we've got to find the bracket after this section items. And I need to have as part of my form, the next thing is a button outside of any section. And what it's going to do is it's going to place the order, right? So I'm going to have text, place order, and then the action is actually going to do three different things. So the first one is going to be to submit the order to Firestore, and when we do that, remember we add it to our list anyway of orders. So we're going to add order. And we can ghost in our student's name from above, our items from above, and our total price from above. We call this ghosting because this value that we're passing in, so this item here is actually in our view model, orders, add order here, right? And then we can do all this stuff with it. But over here in our create order, this student name, the second one that is, relates to this student name here that the user has typed in our form. So very cool. Let's have a look. Double to string. So yep, like we said when we first set it up, we're expecting a string of our total price here. So I'm just going to go nice and easy, string total price. Cool. So we're submitting the order to Firestore. The next thing we need to do is then to dismiss the current view. And just for consistency, I'll put a space in here. And to dismiss the view, all we've got to do is go presentation mode dot wrapped value dot dismiss. So that then goes up to say, yep, this presentation mode, let's dismiss it. Now what that will do is in our orders list view, remember with our button, we have is presented and we're using this show create order view. That's going to turn it back to false when we dismiss. So that's kind of what that function does, which is very cool. Now we're pretty close to finished if you have a think about it. So we have our new orders and we have our student data and we have our items and we have our button to submit the order, or place the order in our case. Now, the only thing that we're really missing then is a bit of padding around our vertical stack, just because when we pop over, if I go back into my simulator, remember I haven't built and run recently, this here doesn't have any padding, so I want to put a little bit of a gap around the edge because I'm pushing my new order with the spacer is going to sit here. So I want it to kind of sit out a little bit from the edge. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to need to do is add the pop over sheet with this show food list so that I can then select items from my food. Now it's very similar to the food list view. The only difference is if I go back in here, instead of this just being text and then as a list in a H stack, I need to have a button with the H stack because when you tap on an item, you want it to do something, or in our case, we want it to dismiss that menu and go back here, add that item to this items list. So what we're going to have to do is create a list to do so. So let's go create a new view before I finish with my content. So we're going to call this one order food list. It's the same as food list view, but it's specific for the order, like we said. It's going to be a type view, and we've got our var body view. So we're pretty much ready to go. You don't have to do this, but it will stop any errors happening, any problems. Now, the things that we're going to need to access is our items list and our binding total price. So we can update that as well. So you can see they're binding, not state variables, which means we're using them from our create order view. So now in our content, we can go order food list like that, and we can ghost in our items and our total price. So now we can pass them along to this view. So now we're done with our first view. Now the other thing I'm going to need is the environment object. So remember, we've got our list of food items. So this is going to look very similar to this, right? So in fact, it's going to look that similar. I'm going to copy this body for now, and I'm going to paste it in this body here in our order food list. So we've got the same body as we did in our food list view, but in our order food list. We're going to have to change it a little bit though, specifically around here. So we'll get there in a minute. So we're going to get this environment object var item view model type item view model. So we've got our items, and I'm going to dismiss the previous. No, sorry, I'm going to dismiss this view with our order food list to get back to our orders. So I'm also going to need the presentation mode environment. Presentation mode. I'm going to call this one presentation mode here. It doesn't matter. It can be the same presentation mode here because it's a different variable, but just for simplicity, I'm going to call it presentation mode here in my order food list. Now we've got our navigation view, and we've got our list of all of our food items. And then for each of the food categories, we're going to divide them up. And then if the food item matches, then we're going to create this H stack, right? Now, ideally, what I would like to do is create a button that's going to do something. And then the content of the button is that H stack. That's what I ideally would like to do. But look, let's try this. Let's see what it does. Last time I tried this though, it threw an error because this view becomes too complicated and it kind of times out. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to construct it because we have a list of buttons in a navigation view. So I think it kind of makes too much of a problem for it. But hey, if this works, it's brilliant. So while it's building, the very last thing we need to do is just basically to have the button add items to the list of items in here, which remember is a binding, so it automatically goes back to this items list, which is a state variable. Now the state variable will say, no worries, I've changed, so then it will update over here our section items, where we've got our list items, and then that will update that list with all of the rest of the items. So it's very clever. We're doing a lot of things all at once when we dismiss this view with this one button action. Again, if it wants to build. I do have a feeling it's too complicated. So while it's building, what we actually wanted to do with this button is to add the item selected to the items list, which is as simple as item view model dot, items, this list of items dot append, and we're going to append the food item. Dot name. just the name to the list. Remember, we've got a list of strings. And then we want to update the total price. So we're going to add to the total price the food item price. The last thing I'm going to do is dismiss this view using the presentation mode here, dot wrapped value. Yeah, see, this is the problem I got. So the compiler is unable to double check. So it's saying like, it's too complicated, I don't get it. So what I'm going to do is take that button. I'm going to cut it for now, but this button is going to be in a separate view. Separate view. Okay, so same thing as before. We're going to have a structure called, what do we want to call this? Let's call this food item button. It's going to be a view. We're going to have a item, a food item. So we're going to need to know what item we're using so we can populate the button with all the detail of it. And we're going to need the items, copy, paste. Whoops. And we're going to need the total price. Cool. Now, I also want the item view model so that I can update bits and pieces. Actually, you know what? I don't even use the item view model. Let's leave this out for now. And then what I'm going to do, instead of creating a presentation mode, another one to dismiss this view in for a button into the list view, instead of doing that, I'm going to create a binding of the presentation mode like this. And then when I create my button view, before I go too far, var body, some view, text, hello world. So then I can use this food item button, and I can pass the item is the food item, and then the items list is the items list. Now the items list is actually this items list, which is already being passed in from the previous view. So it's kind of like piggybacking through. Yeah, and so then our total price is going to be the total price. Again, that's piggybacking through that view. And the presentation mode here is going to be the presentation mode here. So what I'm doing is, because I want to dismiss this order food list when you tap on the button in this view, so it'll go back 1, 2 to the third view back. So that's why we're doing it that way. Now that should actually work. I'm going to build it, but we don't have any text in our button. So let's create this button now. So because there's only one item in the body, I don't need a vertical stack or anything. I just need the button. And this is going to have the text. Actually, no, this is going to have a horizontal stack inside the button. It's going to have the text, item.name, a spacer, and then the item.price, but remembering that the item price is a double value, so we're going to use the formatter to format it with a $sign, the value, 2 decimal places. That's pretty much done. So the action of the button is going to be to add the item to the list. And that's going to be items.append, item name, and then we're going to update the total price. See, that looks better. It's one of those odd errors, hey, where Xcode's like, no, sorry, this is too complicated. But if you put the button in another view, which is, I don't know, even more complicated, it seems to work. So go figure. Okay, so we update the total price. So total price plus equals the item.price. And then we go back to the order summary view. using the presentation mode here, wrapped value, dismiss. That's basically it. Our app is fully functioning. At least this is the minimum viable product. So we're going to build again. Okay, that's good. Build succeeded. Go over to my simulator. Oh, there it is. That's fantastic. So the menu, downloads, shows all the items. We go to orders, and at the moment we don't have any orders, so let's create one. Pops over, we can put a name. So let's put in Mr. Baumeister. Let's add an item. So that pops over again. Now remember, these buttons are actually in that last view, so they're kind of dismissing this menu view. So I'm going to put some chicken breast wedges in. So if I tap on that, dismisses, adds the items to the order, updates the total. So I'm going to do that again one more time with a potato topped pie. So, and again, the total price updates. And I'm just going to scroll down and choose something else. Let's choose an iced coffee. Why not? So you can see they've all added to the list. You can see my divider in the middle, total price, and I've made that a little bit bolder. So when I'm happy, I can either dismiss the view by dragging down, which is implied because it popped over, or I can place order, and when I hit place order, here's my order. Now, it's not formatted ideally. I think I accidentally used a vertical stack instead of a horizontal stack. But the beautiful thing is, in Chrome, if I update now, we will have our list of food items and our list of orders. Here we go. And in our list of orders, you can see my order that I've just created with these 3 items. So that's really, really cool. So if I go back into Xcode, I might just fix up with my order view where I had all of my stuff. If I go back into the simulator so I figure out where I am, I'm in my orders list view. So let's go to orders list view, and I'm looking here at the order. So let's expand this one. For this order, student name, order items, and we have our text, space of text. Now, this probably needed to be in a horizontal stack. All of this stuff here. And let's run again. So you'll notice this doesn't use any local data, so any data that it actually does load is basically from online. Okay, our list of food items, our orders, that looks a lot better. So now they're in a horizontal stack. So now I'll just pull up Google Chrome in the background with our orders. So we should actually see this update as we add orders. So I'm just going to move this over here and we should see a document appear. So if we create another order, this one is going to be for Harrison Ford. And I'm going to assume he wants a pie, and that'll do us for now. Place order. You can see it added Harrison Ford to our database, which is fantastic. So then back in our simulator, if I'm like, nah, I don't want Harrison Ford anymore, he can delete his order, it goes away as well. Now I can delete my order as well. So the only thing to note as students complete this, there will be some order data here, or students will be adding their own and deleting their own. So this list will update pretty rapidly, I suppose, once people get to this stage of their app. Now, I hope you really enjoyed that. That's the end of the tutorial. I'm just going to go through everything that we did as a summary. So the first thing we did, we imported our Google Servers info plist. I would share that with the students either via email or OneNote. Then we added the packages, and we added specifically the Firebase package, which is one here. And then I'm going to hit escape on this. I don't actually want to re-add that package. So then what we did, we set up our food item and our order based on what we wanted to store. Our items list, anything that we're listing is ideally in a list of string format. It's just the easiest way to play with that. You can pass IDs into a string order, and so you can have the item ID as a document ID. So from there, we basically set up our item view model where we had our published list of orders and our published list of food items. And we initialized it. We basically downloading the data. This is in an observable object. So to make all this work, I went back up to my app, I suppose the main structure of the app, and I added a delegate. And that delegate basically configures the Firebase, so it connects to the database. From there, I initialized my view model. I downloaded the data, so I did my get food and get orders, and then I passed it into the environment so that I can access it anywhere in the app. So from there, it was as simple then to create my views. So I've got my content view with a tab view with my food list view, that's my food list view, very basic. And my orders list view is a little bit more complicated, but not by a long way. It's just that now we have sections where this order, the name that the order is in is as a section. So as you add more orders, they kind of push through. And when we tap on a button to delete the order, we delete the order. And we also have an ability to pop over another view, which is the create order view. And because this is all in the same popover, I've left it in the same file. It's up to you how you want it to format it. And to create the order, we created these items in a form with two different sections. And then basically, when we tap on the button to create the order, we use the item view model add order function, and then we dismiss back to our orders list. And then in our order, we need to know what item to select. So we then popped over a second view on the first popover, which is our food list. That's it. I really hope you enjoyed that and you get something valuable out of this. Using our orders list view.